Mac Power Users, episode 489, Gear as a Motivator with Tyler Stalman. Hello, everyone. This is David Sparks, along with my pal, Stephen Hackett. How are you today, Stephen?
I'm good, David. How are you?
I'm excited. We have a guest on the show, someone I followed online for a long time, and I'm real happy to have him on the Mac Power Users. Welcome to the show, Tyler Stalman.
Wow, talk about excited. I'm the excited one here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, Mac Power Users, come on. Classic.
Mutual Excitement Society.
Yeah.
We want to talk to Tyler. Is a photographer, a businessman, so many things Tyler does. We're going to talk about all of that in the show. Before we do, though, there's just a couple upfront notices we have, a little bit of introductory business.
Yeah, few short things. As promised in the last episode, I've created a thread in the MPU forums looking for MPU 500 questions. So if you're on the forums, you can send those to me there, or of course you can just tweet with the hashtag MPU 500, and I have a little robot going out there and collecting those for me. Or you can just drop me an email. But I'm looking for questions that you want asked of David. So don't send them to David, just send them to me, or just send them with that hashtag, and I will be scooping those up.
I am intentionally not reading that thread. I am a little bit nervous about that thread. I'm not going to lie.
It'll be a safe place, I promise.
Okay. In front of a live audience of hundreds of people. So There's really no escape, right? You know, whatever he drops on me, I'm stuck with. I made something I just wanted to share real quick. I've heard a lot of feedback from listeners and readers about the state of dictation on Mac and iOS. Nuance has been pulling out. I was going to write a short blog post. It turned into a really long blog post and a 17-minute YouTube video. I don't know what happened, Stephen. It's a manifesto is what it is about dictation. And I did a whole bunch of samples on screencasting and different things with the different dictation engines and how they work and don't work. So if you've got any interest in that stuff, we'll put a link in the show notes. That post is going up right before this show does. And last thing I wanted to mention was during the week that this show was in production, Apple released the public beta of iOS 13 and Mac Catalina. I just thought we should just say up front, I know, Stephen, you've been using it on your Mac. We're going to spend a lot of time on this. We're going to do a whole show on this stuff later. But I think my recommendation would be do not load that. I didn't realize they were going to put the public beta out this early. I'm running beta 2 on an iPad. I'm running beta 2 of Catalina on an extra Mac, and I don't think either one of them are ready for a public beta. I was surprised.
It seems early to me. Apple has said July. Here we are at the end of June, and they're out. I would say if you want to check it out, do it on an external drive. Do it on a spare iPad. Don't dive in headfirst to this quite yet.
Yeah, I just, there be dragons.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say that last year, but I'm saying it this year.
They were sleeping last year, and now they're awake and hungry.
Yes, and they will eat your data. Anyway, Tyler Stalman, welcome to the Mac Power Users.
Hi, thanks.
I thought we should start just by sharing a little bit of your background with the audience.
I'm gonna have like a long list of things because I've done quite a variety of different bits of media that all have some things in common. So sometimes my job description is sort of complicated, but it's part of what I'm interested in. So I'll start by just saying an idea I wrap my head around lately that I kind of like is in the development world, we have the idea of like full stack development where somebody is, aware of all the different levels of development and is able to more or less write a complete application kind of on their own. Whether or not there's such things like a true full stack developer. Anyway, I've started thinking about that in terms of creation. So the things that I'm into are video, photo, audio. I want to start doing music. Like I want to be able to kind of do everything from beginning to end in creative production. And I've so far done a pretty wide variety of those things. So I don't know. That's kind of my long-term goal. My background, I guess, is that I started as a web designer at iStock Photo, right when it was kind of starting up, which was built in my hometown of Calgary. And then I started selling my photos through the website, licensing them there, which turned into more income than I was making doing the web design. So I was able to start doing full-time freelance photography. And then since I was friends with the founder of iStock, after he sold the company to Getty, we ended up working together on a few different web projects. So We wanted to do things like Life Magazine's website, a site for the Saatchi Gallery, and most recently Stocksy United, which is another stock photo company. And then I met my wife right when we started doing Stocksy United. And now her and I run our business together, doing photo, video, and the things I mentioned earlier. So that's kind of the fast forward version.
Now, did you always know that, I mean, did you want to become a professional photographer, or was that something how did you, it's quite a change, from web developer to photographer.
Yeah.
Was it a plan, or how did it happen?
It really came out of the interest in gear. With so many of these things, I think this is how I ended up with the variety of goals of having different skills, is I love the gear. Like, cameras are such beautiful objects. I wanted to own nice cameras, and to have an excuse to buy a nice camera, I have to get better at photography. And it's actually even the same for audio. I mean, I make a podcast because I'm a bad musician, but I still wanted to have a nice microphone, and I still wanted, I honestly, being a gearhead drove a lot of the creation. And so same with, computers, I care a lot about, and I find a lot of interest in. So, okay, if I want the best and fastest computer, I need to give myself an excuse to need it. So that means creating some complicated media. So it sounds kind of backwards. I don't know if maybe it's the wrong motivation to have, or not as altruistic as a creative should have. But I really like using technology, and so I get excited about where it meets creativity.
I kind of get that, and I bet a lot of listeners do too, because I know there are certain areas of my life where gear has driven interest, and cameras would be one of them.
Yeah, anytime I have a new camera, it's an excuse to go shoot. I'm way more excited about shooting the same thing I always shoot, just because I want to see how this new camera is going to perform.
I was in bed watching the Sony menu video, because the menu system on the Sony cameras is quite intense. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sitting there with the camera body, and I've got the YouTube video. It's like an hour-long video. And my wife walks in and just looks at me like I'm completely insane.
I mean, maybe we are. Which Sony are you using, actually?
A7 III.
One of the A7s. Yeah, that's the same one here.
Steven is partly responsible for that expense, by the way.
Good job. No, that's good to have friends that can push you in the right direction.
I love my A7 III, but yeah, the menu system, boy, sometimes you're just wandering around for days in there looking for what you want.
Once you get me started on gear, I'll have a lot to say.
Well, I find that I guess your idea of like the gear as a motivator for you, I sort of like your honesty in that. I feel like there are people who would say that the gear, like, don't let the gear get in your way and just start creating, but you're not saying that. I think what you're saying is the gear sort of, you like it to sort of push you into new, maybe like whole new areas. And I think that's an interesting take, and one that I agree with, I resonate with as well. Do you think, though, like, if someone is, getting started, or they are struggling with, the creation process, like, at what point do they need to look at their gear and think, is this what's holding me back? Or, like, do you have a philosophy about that when talking with creators who are just starting out?
It's a tough one. I mean, it's not something any of us ever really get past. I think the common wisdom is people will say the gear doesn't matter. Just go create. And there's so much to that, especially with modern cell phones. I mean, what you can create with an iPhone is incredible. So if that's all you have, you can start doing things that other people will find interesting, like, or that you'll feel excited about. Like, whatever you have right now, you can go create something great, because the good technology has trickled down to the mainstream. So everything we have is actually pretty impressive. But it is worth acknowledging that you do set limits of the quality of output. And fortunately, you get to the top quality pretty quick. Like, you get 80% of the performance of what a camera can do once you spend $1,200. That, even though you can spend $100,000 if you want, and there is an improvement after that point, you're already most of the way there when you have an A7 III. That has most of the quality any photographer needs for anything. So it's good to know what those differences are. Like, what gains do you get as you start to spend a little bit more money, but you really shouldn't obsess over them, because those differences become marginal.
Yeah, I definitely am above my weight class with my camera, but I've been doing a bunch of YouTube and different stuff lately, and it really has made the process easier. And I guess that's the way for me that the gear helps drive the content, because like, oh, wait, now that I have equipment capable of doing X, Y, and Z, it's time for me to try that. And then suddenly that stuff finds it into a field guide or a video.
Well, an interesting thing about the A7 III is that it really is priced in the mid-range, and it performs as a professional camera. I really found it an exciting step in production, and I have a lot of complaints about it. I'm actually thinking about getting rid of it for one thing, but I do have a lot of good things to say about it. I'm glad that it exists because the video quality and the photo quality is truly professional grade. Like, you could work with this camera, but the price is lower than what you used to need to get that same image quality. I mean, and basically it dropped it by about $1,000. I'm thinking in Canadian terms, by the way. I know American prices will be a bit different, but it kind of went down from $3,000 to $2,000 with the release of the A7 III. I think it was a great step forward for that.
And Canadian dollars are different value and friendlier, right?
Yeah, they apologize.
So what sort of work are y'all doing now? Sort of generally, you've taken this path where you've ended up in this content world working with your wife, but what sort of work are y'all doing?
So this is when I have a hard time explaining it, and just because it's complicated, I don't want to make that sound fancy. Like, just because there's a long list of different things, I don't want it to make it sound like, oh, I'm so busy and I have so much going on. It's more that we've almost had a hard time ever saying no to things. So if an opportunity comes up, we're like, yeah, we'll make it work. We'll figure out how to do it. And that means that what our business has become is saying yes to so many different types of things. So a lot of it, like kind of the backbone, is commercial photo and video production. And a lot of the time we'll do both of those same things for a client, which I find to be a bit of an upsell, because a lot of the times to have that done well, you do need to go to two different people. It's really challenging for one person to shoot photos and videos at the same time. So my wife, Ania, will often take photos if I'm shooting video, and we're able to do that together. And a lot of the time she'll also, if we're just shooting photos, she'll do a lot of the art production and pre-production, and then I'll do more of the technical, like, holding the camera and stuff like that. And so that'll be commercial, meaning that, things from magazines, which used to be a much bigger part of our business, but a lot of magazines have disappeared lately. So they're not even there. Which means we used to work a lot more out of Toronto, but now it means that a lot more of our work has become spread out to just being through online clients. It's become more less location dependent, which has been interesting. So now the commercial work becomes more web-based. So things that will be used in advertising and I don't know, whatever people need photos and videos for. Which I could also differentiate that in the higher end, like we're kind of at like mid-level production where we're working directly with the client. There is a level of production that's above us where we'd be going through an agency, and the agency would be hiring us out as just like the cinematographer or the director or both. And there'd also be a creative agency in between. We're at the direct to business level where we're managing all of that ourselves, and we hire a few people, but that's just kind of where we sit in terms of how things get made for us, because it can change as you move up and down the chain.
And that has a whole bunch of different challenges because every client is different. Whereas when you work through an agency, you're kind of insulated from that.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of our biggest challenges are context shifting constantly. That we do, we're constantly kind of changing our focus and remembering how we were dealing with this one other previous relationship, and then we have to go back and work on the project at night that we were doing with another client. So there's always this moving back and forth, and that's something we'd like to get better at. What's becoming a bigger part of it is social media stuff. So my wife's had a fashion blog for a long time. So for a few years, that was actually what we were doing for most of our work, was shooting things that would appear on the blog. And sponsorships were kind of where the money came in through that. And then Instagram as well, which would also have sponsored posts on it. And and then she'd also like appear in TV and magazines and stuff. So supporting her was like a big thing for quite a while. Now my YouTube has started to become a bit more popular. So that's become another income channel, as well as my podcast, which they're all, sponsorship related. So it's that a brand will approach us with like, hey, we want to get the message out there, just similar to how you guys do it. And they get a little message put into our content.
I'm always so impressed when thinking about the work that y'all do, that you seem to have done a really good job in adapting as time has gone on. So as clientele changes, as one medium becomes more popular and maybe one begins to fade a little bit, y'all seem to do a really good job being able to make those changes, with the environment you're in. And I know, like, someone else who owns like a creative media business, that can be difficult and scary if all of your eggs are sort of in one basket. But it seems like y'all have done a really good job at having multiple projects, multiple streams of income to keep the business running as long as it has.
Yeah, I think that's an advantage of being interested in the technology, that a lot of people will say your business is based on running a magazine. When magazines become Twitter accounts or Instagram accounts, or when they really shift to what the business is, if you are more attached to just creating the content, which I don't blame people for. I mean, I can totally understand how you get into that. But if you just find the technology frustrating, and when you try to learn something new, it upsets you and you want to push it away, that makes it much harder to transition. And I almost feel lucky that those changes are exciting for me, because I know that for people that are frustrated by them, it's a big barrier to moving somewhere new.
I almost feel like in the modern world, the disruption cycle has been drastically compressed. Like when my dad was in business, I think disruption largely was on a 20 or 30-year cycle, whereas now it seems like it's on a 2 or a 3-year cycle. It's so easy to suddenly become obsolete with what you're doing. You've constantly got to be thinking about what the next move is.
Yeah, it is challenging. I mean, I would say that it has sort of slowed lately. Just if you look at the amount of social platforms, the ones that I'm talking about that we're kind of succeeding on are getting pretty old right now. I mean, all of them are going on 10 years old, and nothing really big has come up in that time. I'd say except with the exception of TikTok, which we have not been able to make work for us. I haven't even tried. That is for young people. And Snapchat as well. Like, we were kind of there for a bit, but it faded. But it's become a little more stable lately. I think that's partly because it's just so hard for startups to compete with these giant social media companies. But the shape of them changes. So, Instagram is becoming stories. The posts are almost fading into people's people aren't even noticing posts anymore. It's all about Instagram stories. So each platform is shifting pretty quickly now.
Now, are you still doing stock photography?
Yeah, definitely. So on Stocks United, we still have all of our stuff there. We have image number 1 there, which is kind of fun. And
nice.
But we don't keep. We haven't been uploading for a little while just because the other things keep us busy. But I mean, it's been great to have that little bit of trickle side income for a long time now. It still does make a noticeable amount of money. It's not enormous. We definitely couldn't live off of it, but it is still possible to make money off stock photos, which, I mentioned that earlier. I was working at iStock Photo out of college, and that was a real golden era. Like, stock photography was, if you were in the right place at the right time, it was amazing that I was able to have a full-time job just licensing images at that time in my life. It was pretty incredible. The value has dropped quite a bit. Like, the bottom has dropped out of that market a lot. So the nice thing is that Stocksy, our whole purpose in founding it was to make it a co-op. So all the contributors actually own parts of the company. So at the end of the year, everybody gets a bonus based on how much they sold, and everybody votes on where the company's going. So it was a really unique type of company, or actually co-op. It's not a corporation or anything. So that's been able to keep going for a while now, which has been pretty great.
Well, Tyler, you're doing a lot of stuff. That's pretty remarkable, really. I didn't realize how far down the stack you went.
I should sleep more.
How much of your work, if you were to balance it, like how much of it is like your commercial work versus the projects you're pursuing with your wife? I mean, how does it all balance out?
Well, if I look at the last month, we probably had about one commercial job per week, and it's actually pretty easy to break down. So I've had about like one social media job per week. She's had about one social media job and one commercial job per week. That's kind of what we've been doing really recently.
This is something we talk about on Focused all the time, but I'll tell you, for me, because I have two things. I'm a lawyer, but I'm also a professional nerd. That balance is never easy. How's it going for you?
Oh, terrible. I mean, like, it's good in the way that, like, we get to do exciting things. We travel a lot. We've been able to do things we have aspired to, which has been really great. But, being inside of it, we also just see all the obstacles and all the ways that we can improve. And definitely just the ability to organize or the advantages of focusing, we are aware that we're missing out on them. Like, there are things that by doing so much, you end up missing some of the positive parts of having a regular schedule and showing up in the same place every morning. So that's our goal for the next 5 years, is to really kind of turn it into a bit more of a system and be able to treat it more like a normal business and less like 5 different businesses.
Getting used to letting go of things. I think it's not that you ever get used to it, but getting able to accept that, I think that's the battle in my mind. Hey, if gear is a motivator, I want to talk about your gear right after this.
This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by SaneBox. SaneBox is a service that, quite frankly, just makes your email better. It learns what email is important to you, and then it filters out the rest, saving you hours and hours. And it works with all kinds of email programs and services. You're not logging into their special app where you're stuck. You can, go and on an email app Vision Quest like David has, using it across a range of services. And we're talking about SaneBox, we're talking about great email filtering. They have things like Sane Later that keeps your inbox full of only what really matters, as other emails are just stored away for later. There's Sane Black Hole, where you can unsubscribe from an email with a simple click. You can snooze emails. I do this often on the weekend and, pick something up on Monday. And then there's Sane Reminders. You can CC something like 1 week at sanebox.com. And if your receiver doesn't reply back to you, you get a reminder in your inbox in a week. It's a great way to make sure you're getting the replies you need. And SaneBox offers more than just filtering. You can move attachments to Dropbox or other cloud services. Lots of great features over on their website. SaneBox has various pricing plans starting at as low as about $4 a month. But if you go to sanebox.com/MPU, you can sign up for a 14-day free trial. And when you do sign up, you'll receive a $25 credit on any plan. And my guess is that you're going to love it because 66% of MPU listeners who have tried SaneBox end up subscribing. That's sanebox.com/MPU to receive a $25 credit on any plan. Our thanks to SaneBox for making our email better and for their support of MPU. All right, so I know from your YouTube channel that you recently made the jump to the USB-C Thunderbolt Touch Bar world of the MacBook Pro. Is that your only machine? I mean, I know you guys travel a lot, so I assume that that's at least an important part of your setup.
Yeah, it's turned into the only machine that I'm really able to access a lot of the time. Right now, I'm recording into a 27-inch iMac, the generation just before 4K. Let me just pull up okay, so this is a late 2013 i7. So I maxed out this iMac when I got it because I love iMacs a lot. I mean, I've been using them for a long time. I like the power of them. I would be using an iMac Pro right now, except we travel too much to put it to use. So unfortunately, I don't get to edit at a desktop very often. So a funny side effect to that is that it means that a lot of the time I'm editing 4K video in a tiny chunk of the window that's less than it's like 720 pixels wide. I can barely see this 4K footage because I'm on a laptop. But the MacBook Pro, this is the 2018 model before they upgraded the graphics cards to the Vega GPUs. And it's been serving me really well. It handles everything that I throw at it. Sometimes I'm waiting, at times that I would rather not. Generally, that's when I'm transcoding raw 4K footage. That's when it starts to struggle a bit. But most things, it can really chew through it pretty well. It's been doing a really great job.
So you're using it just as a notebook. I mean, you at the office are using an external display or extra storage, or just basically a notebook that goes where you go?
So I recently got a BenQ monitor, 32-inch, but I really haven't integrated it into any kind of workflow. So far, I've been using it to plug my camera into and monitor what the camera's doing. So usually I'm just using the laptop, and yes, lots of external storage. Another negative side effect of the traveling and kind of the variety of work we do is it means that I can't have a giant RAID that I'm always accessing. So we are constantly buying portable USB drives that we just cycle through relatively quickly. And I always have 2 mirrored ones at all times wherever we're going. So when we're traveling, that means that I'll have a copy of the photo drive and a copy of the video drive, and my wife will have a copy of the photo drive and the video drive. So they're separated, and we have redundancy when we travel. But it means we just have a big stack of portable drives kicking around.
So are those spinning drives or SSDs?
Yeah, they're spinning. The best thing I upgraded about the MacBook Pro is putting a 2 terabyte SSD inside. I'm so grateful that I did, because it means I can store most of my current projects on it. So usually that's, maybe 2 or 3 YouTube videos and the last month's worth of photography. And that means that generally I don't need to rely on fast external storage, because I've tried doing that, but they weren't big enough, and I don't know, it just didn't work out. So I was really glad to have a big SSD inside. That's made a huge difference.
Yeah, and the external SSDs are still really expensive. But just talk through your workflow on that a little bit. Like, what do you put on the spinning drive? How did you decide to, and how does it get there?
Sure. Well, I'll separate the photo and video side. For photography, we use Lightroom as our main management software, which I have some frustrations with. I do keep casting my eye around. I mean, Capture One is a really incredible piece of software that's giving Adobe a run for their money. But still, currently, we are using Lightroom, and that means that every time we plug an SD card into the computer, we download all the photos to the external drive, and Lightroom is linking to them, and it just generates previews. So when the drive's not there, we can see all the photos, but we can't edit them. So a lot of the time, we'll need to be plugged in to be accessing them. Then we will delete all the bad photos, because we shoot a really, really high volume. So I mean, we just did a trip to Israel, and that was almost 30,000 photos in a week. It was too much.
Well, wait a second.
A lot of that gets deleted.
30,000. So how do you separate the wheat from the chaff quickly with 30,000 photos?
My wife does it. That's part of how.
Oh, I need to talk to my wife about this.
Yeah. Well, it's a nice thing of having a business partner, but she'll do that hard work of actually going through everything. And a lot of it is just being kind of ruthless. And most of these photos are basically duplicates, right? Like almost all of them look kind of the same. And it's just about choosing the best ones. It's harder when it's something like shooting an event and every photo is quite different, because then you're tempted by more good photos. You're tempted to keep more. Yeah. But when they're all very similar, you're like, look, I'm glad to get rid of, I have 200 versions of this one photo. I'll get rid of all but 3, and that is fine.
Yeah, it's almost like the Marie Kondo approach, right? Rather than picking photos to delete, you're picking photos to keep.
Exactly. Yes, that is the only way to survive overshooting, which I would say we're on the very high side. Most people doing the same jobs as us can still do the jobs shooting less. We happen to work in a way where we're shooting more volume.
How about you, Stephen? Do you have, like, in your library, do you have like 17 pictures of one pose?
I do a pretty good job of weeding stuff out on import. For instance, Father's Day was about a month ago, and took a bunch of pictures of the kids with various family members in the yard. Everyone's dressed up nice, and I went through those. And when I imported them, there are definitely some photos that are similar that I kept, but I try to go through and, if I'm not happy with it today, I'm not going to be happy with it tomorrow. So go ahead and get rid of those that, the exposure's a little weird, or, some kid is mid-blink or something. Those don't get to stick around.
All right. So I interrupted. Tyler, you got your 30,000 whittled down to 1,000? I don't know.
Yeah, we'll probably hold on to 1,000, and we'll use, I don't know. I'm trying to think what this example really is. Yeah. So that was 1,000 from like a week, and then we'll use 100 of them. Then the good photos will be edited in Photoshop for just basic things like removing junk in the background. Usually it's just kind of spot removal stuff. That's all Photoshop is used for us. Save the PSD back into Lightroom, and then do the color editing using Lightroom's raw editing tools. Yeah, that's most of the workflow. And then we export the JPEGs to Dropbox, and that's how we share the finals between each other and the client. And
the when you're done, that's when you export them off to the external drive, which gets mirrored.
No, so they live on that external drive. Oh, okay. Well, there's a bit of a complication because there's two of us, and we were working on different computers. I was trying to make it sound simple. I was trying to explain it in the one computer way.
Sure.
But so she's got the drive, and the Lightroom catalog is on her computer. She sends me raw files of the ones that I'm going to edit. I edit those PSDs on my computer, and then I from there export the JPEGs, which become the JPEGs are like our finals. We don't really worry as much about. We keep the raw originals, but the deliverables are always JPEG. We don't deliver in TIFF or anything like that because it's generally not worth the file size.
Do you share the Lightroom library? I mean, is it like on the external drive so you can bounce it between both computers?
No. Unfortunately, there isn't a great way to work as a team with Lightroom. It just doesn't do anything for you. You have to kind of just make it work for yourself. And there's not a lot of other people I've found that have had the same problems as me. So I haven't found a way to solve it. So if anybody listening knows how to make two computers and two people sync together in Lightroom, let me know. But we have just kind of a makeshift way of making it work. That it's a little janky because of the two people, but it works. Yeah, well, and I'll quickly blast through the video section of the Mac too, which I'll just do it quick. Final Cut is where all the real editing happens. A recommendation is Motion VFX for their plugins. They have great transitions and stuff. When I'm editing the raw 4K, I'll do the coloring and resolve, and then I'll usually use Audition to kind of sweeten the audio, which is also what I use to do the podcast. So yeah, the audio stuff is Audio Hijack and Isotope. That's all the Mac.
Isotope is always the end of the story for everybody that touches audio, isn't it?
It's so good. It can do things that no other app can. So Isotope, great for noise removal, echo reduction. If you have, a lot of even just like background noise that you couldn't get out in other ways. And Audition and Logic and other apps have noise reduction, but the way Isotope does it is some sort of magic. I mean, it can fix things and repair audio that I thought were long gone. It can pull back from the brink. It's really impressive.
Absolutely. I was using Audition noise removal before, and I stopped using it because it was so bad. It really deteriorated the audio, but Isotope maintains all the original quality.
Every screencast I make goes through Isotope. I think Steven's doing the edits these days. Every episode of MPU goes through Isotope, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have good recording setups, but so it's not just like field work. I mean, anything, even in a nice studio, you can always improve. It's really incredible.
And they're always putting it on sale. I got it on sale last year. If you're interested in that application, just sign up for their newsletter and just wait. What about over on iOS? What hardware are you using and to take all these pictures with your phone?
Yeah, so an iPhone XS, which we actually use for real work relatively often because in the era of social media advertising, like a lot of brands are where their ads end up is social media. So it's not necessarily a negative to have it feel like it was shot on a phone. So we actually do shoot on our phones quite a lot. And the XS has been great. I also really like the XR. The new generation of cameras is really amazing. It was a big jump forward that I think was very underhyped in the announcement, although it does have some weird HDR still. But
how do you see it? I mean, what's the big improvement that needs to be talked about?
The dynamic range. It was a real jump. Like that's why I push people towards a XR or XS instead of a 10, because the way HDR was handled just took a leap forward. I mean, they kept calling it Smart HDR. I don't think they changed the branding around it or anything. They're just like, oh, there's improvements to it. And then I realized once I started testing it, I'm like, wait, this is starting to really compete with the big cameras, especially in terms of video. You need to have a top-of-the-line camera to get the same dynamic range. I find that even in some situations, the A7R III can't have the same dynamic range as the video from an iPhone XS. It's really amazing.
That's
the downside
crazy.
is that sometimes that HDR becomes... it looks fake. So if I'm wearing a black shirt and there's something dark behind me, it'll make it look totally nuts. There are flaws in it, and that's the main thing I'm hoping they fix in the next generation.
We definitely live in the age of computational photography now. While the sensor in the iPhone is smaller than you're going to get in a big camera, the processor, I think, is probably better than anything you're going to find in a big camera.
Yeah, this is something people comment on video. Anytime I review a phone on YouTube, everybody is saying like, "Well, what if Canon could do this in their bodies?" And it would be amazing. I mean, it needs to be integrated at that level. Like they need to be all in the same camera, because just doing it in post is not the same. Like it's the way that the photo is taken. And I would love to see big sensors do that someday.
The problem is that Apple has literally billions of dollars and years of research into that, and that's going to be hard to compete with.
Nobody's catching up anytime soon.
I think you're more likely to see Apple get a bigger sensor than to see Canon and some of these other companies get that background processing.
Yeah, and then the other things they use, I mean, I usually use the default camera app. I mean, people might ask. I like Halide as well. But I don't shoot in RAW that often. Usually I just shoot in HEIF. And then the apps that I like the most, VSCO for editing colors. Spark Camera is a way that I create little like micro vlogs, especially for Instagram stories. And I also use Video Leap for editing. But I keep it pretty simple. I test a lot of different things, but those are the ones I come back to the most often.
You had told us before that you use these moment lenses. Could you explain those a little bit?
Yeah, moment lenses they're pretty great. I mean, they make your phone look like a real camera. That's the best part, obviously. And they're just these big, like real, like glass lenses that are very well constructed that will let you have different focal lengths on your iPhone. The main reason I find them useful is for wide angle photography. So the 18 millimeter is the one that gets the most use. And basically I think a confusion about these lenses is a lot of people see them and think, oh, does that make your photos look better? Like they're not really clear what that means, but they're like, well, the phone looks more like a camera, so the photo must be better. It's not any better. It's that it's changing your field of view, the amount you can see in the photo that you're taking. And if the next iPhone let's say it comes with an ultra wide lens, Moment will need to find a new place in the market, because that's all that it's really doing. It's taking the same lens that you currently have and making it see more of the scene. But it does a great job of it. So I really like carrying around that 18 millimeter.
Yeah, I am a fan of the Moment lenses too. I have a few of them, and I like the system to begin with because they have a case that they make, and it has, in essence, a screw over the lens unit of the camera where you can just screw the Moment lens on, but then you can take it off and it's just a case. And then when you get a new phone, like if the phone upgrades, they make a new case for the new body style. So you don't have to go back and rebuy lenses, which we used to have to do when we were getting these add-on lenses a few years ago. And they're great. Like Tyler said, I think they do a good job of changing the focal length of your phone. And they fit in a jeans pocket. I mean, I walked all over Europe with these lenses in my pocket. And anytime I saw something interesting, I wanted a wider angle. And I like the fisheye too, which I know some people really don't like fisheye, but occasionally it works. And like I was in a cathedral or something and I didn't have a lot of room, I'd screw the fisheye on my camera and just get this amazing picture. It's a really easy upgrade for your iPhone if you want to improve your camera game.
Yeah, and one more recommendation I could make is in terms of cases, I really like the Nomad Moment mount case. So the company's Nomad, but they make one with a Moment mount on it. And I prefer it to the Moment cases.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's really great. I'm looking at it right now. It's on my phone. This Moment. They have a leather back. They kind of look like a blend between the leather Apple cases and...
You're going to cost me money, Tyler.
That's what happens on this show sometimes. I think a lot of people sometimes struggle, maybe they own a full-size camera or, even a nice point shoot, something better than an iPhone. But the iPhone's, of course, always in their pocket. It's always with them, and you can share basically instantly to social media. Where do you think that line is when the iPhone is the right tool versus, hey, you know what, it's time to pull out one of my bigger weapons?
Yeah, it really can compete at when you look at the images smaller. So on an iPhone screen, the difference between an iPhone photo and a bigger camera is not so obvious, other than, if you have like some nice bokeh in the black background, the blur of a real camera, that's the final thing that I still don't find that portrait mode can really compete with. But other than that, they'll look almost the same on a screen size. It's once you look any bigger than that. So as soon as it's on a laptop or a slightly bigger print, you can really start to see cell phones fall apart a bit. They start to look a little more mushy, and you can just see like some texture to the detail that isn't ideal. That's about it, though. So for social media purposes, it kind of doesn't matter. But if it's something that you really care about for the long run, I've definitely had some photos that I took on my phone. At the time, I was like, hey, iPhones are amazing. The camera's great on this thing.
Right.
And of course, this was an iPhone 5S. And now I look back at those photos, I'm like, I probably should have taken that on a real camera. They are better now. Like, we have definitely crossed a different line. But if you really care about the photo, I think you should still use a real camera. I mean, for example, anytime somebody is going to have a new baby, I would say you should go buy a real camera. It's absolutely worth it for those really critical memories that are going to matter forever.
I think I totally agree with that. I definitely have those images in my photo libraries when my kids were really little. It's like, man, what a great picture. I'm sad that I took it with what I took it with. And some of that is size. Some of those early images wouldn't look good if I had them printed. But there's just quality that you can get from a bigger sensor with more distance from the glass that the iPhone, no matter how good it is, just can't compete with yet.
No, it's true. I don't know if it'll ever catch up with everything. There are things about optics and the distance of a sensor to a lens, and there's certain things that will always look a certain way because of the size of the camera. Even if the sensors can really compete.
Well, I think also part of it is as the iPhone gets better, it's like when you say get a real camera, that you need to get a nice camera to replace the quality of an iPhone photo at this point. It's
yeah. I mean, the mid-range market, the point and shoot market, there's very few reasons to get a point and shoot anymore. Like, you have to have really specific needs. Like, maybe you need a really long zoom and it needs to be small. But there's not many reasons to get a point and shoot these days.
Well, as a professional, you do have you have several real cameras. Which ones are you using, and how'd you pick them?
Yeah, so I have the A7 III I mentioned earlier, which that was our main video camera for a while. It does incredible 4K, 120 frames per second slow motion, and it's small, and it has sensor stabilization. So I bought it entirely as a video camera. It was kind of a backup stills camera. It just happens to also work well for stills, but I much prefer Canon for stills work. So the 5D Mark IV is what we've been using since it came out. So usually we'll be traveling with those two cameras. And I'm interested in the EOS R. I think that would make sense to replace the A7 III right now. But also just to give a bit of explanations, the things I don't like about the A7 III, I know you have one, so I don't want to make you feel bad about it. I mean, the quality is really incredible.
I'll just blame Steven.
But it is a pain. It is a pain to use it. I mean, the way you're describing the menu, it's even once you have memorized the menu, it's still a mess. It's still a challenge, and you're always fighting with that user interface a bit. And same with the color. The color on Sony, a lot of people have said like Canon has the best color and Sony is worse. I think there's a little confusion around that. They both capture as much information as you need to make the color look great. But if you don't want to spend time refining the colors, Canon gets to a nice place sooner. So I find on the A7 III, I need to massage them a little bit more to make them look great.
It is for me. It was such an improvement over any camera I've ever owned. I'm still in a honeymoon phase with it.
You should be. It's great. It's such a
literally. I have to try to take a bad picture. I have to intentionally screw something up to get a bad picture with the camera.
No, it's amazing. And then the one I'm excited about. So I mean, this is the camera I'm most excited to use whenever I can lately is the Canon C200. And this is our first big video camera, like dedicated video camera. It is it's a cinema camera, so it does not shoot stills at all. And it shoots in 4K RAW, which RAW it's been amazing to be able to do that with video. It makes a really huge difference. I mean, again, if anybody listening has a good camera, if you have an A7 III and you're shooting JPEGs instead of RAW, you're missing out a lot. RAW's the best. I don't usually think it's worth it on phones, but on a bigger camera, it's worth it. So for video, it's been fantastic to have that flexibility and that dynamic range and that image quality. I've been really happy with the C200 so far.
So we've talked about RAW versus JPEG before on the show, but give us just kind of a summary for folks that haven't heard that before, and maybe some tips, because I think a lot of folks do have cameras that can shoot RAW, but they're afraid of the storage and just the data management pieces that come with that. Maybe you got any ideas to help people out?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, on the storage side, it can become a bit of a challenge. It's much, much bigger to keep RAW files. The trick is you got to delete the bad ones. You can't hold on to everything all the time. And then in some ways, you just kind of have to buy more storage. There is a little bit more management there. But in terms of actually like manipulating the files and stuff, you have so much more flexibility in terms of how you can actually change it and what you're able to adjust. The most important advantage that goes the longest way is being able to change the white balance. Because if you're on auto white balance and it gets it wrong, you're
kind of dead.
You can't do much in a JPEG. The JPEG, if it's too yellow or too blue, you can't really pull it in either direction without losing a lot of saturation and just destroying the image quality. In RAW, changing the white balance has no impact on the photo. You can go as far as you want in either direction, totally fine. Then similar goes for exposure. You don't have it's not infinite flexibility. It can degrade the image as you go up and down, but you have a lot more flexibility. And once you start getting used to RAW, and then you go back and edit a JPEG, you're like, wow, where did all the flexibility go? Where did all my sliders? My sliders are broken now. It's one of those things that you don't have to go do it. If you find editing photos to be a burden and it's frustrating to you, it may not be for you. I think some people end up shooting RAW and it becomes more challenge. It's so much harder for them to take photos that maybe they shouldn't have done it. Because if you end up shooting less because you're afraid of filling your hard drive, that's not ideal either. So I think like you got to commit to making a bit of a jump. You might need to buy an extra hard drive, but your image quality really can go up. And then in terms of JPEG, the reason I prefer to stick to, I'm saying JPEG, but now it's HEIF on iPhones, to compressed formats on iPhones, is that since the sensor is so much smaller, Apple has already figured out how to extract all that data that you would get from a RAW file. They're doing an amazing job of editing it before it even gets to you. So when you take a RAW photo on an iPhone, you have to do a lot of work to get back to the starting place that Apple gave you for free. And it takes up a lot more space, and you're not getting as big of an advantage. The biggest advantage, though, I'll say on iPhones is in low light. It can be a lot sharper, a little noisier, but it's usually worth it.
I have never gone down the rabbit hole of shooting RAW on an iPhone. So it sounds like it can be worth it.
It sounds like, based on how you shoot, it's not. I still don't do it very often. You know, I was just telling you how much I love RAW for everything else, but I rarely ever do it. I only do it in low light situations where I really want the photo to look amazing. And that's kind of the only time, because it's not a night and day difference. I think it's usually worth it to stick to the compressed format.
My workflow with my Sony, I shoot in RAW. I bring him I use Photoshop, Photoshop's RAW environment, and edit. And most of the time I end up saving them out as high quality JPEGs. And I will keep the RAW images on occasion, like if it's a family photo shoot or something like that. But if it's just, hey, I shot these, over the course of a weekend, I sort of let RAW do what give me what it will give me as far as editing. But once I've got them where I want them, I'll just save JPEGs to my Photos library for that storage space. So you can mix and match these a little bit, but absolutely, I think if you've got a camera that has that option, I'd say flip it on, go shoot for a weekend, and spend some time editing them on the Mac or on the iPad, and I think you'll be won over if you spend some time editing with the format. It's just wild how much you can change and adapt those images.
Well, and I'll also say that in the video workflow, that is what I'm doing as well, because the C200 RAW video takes up. So I have 256 gigabyte cards, and that shoots half an hour.
Yikes!
So you get half an hour for 256. So what I've been doing is transcoding it right away. So I load the whole day worth of shooting into DaVinci Resolve, and I make my fixes. I'm like, okay, well, I got the white balance wrong on this, and I got the exposure a little off on that, and I just tweak everything and extract all the data I can. Basically do, what I was describing Apple does intelligently on all of its photos. I'm doing that manually on everything. I'm like, okay, everything is now got the most data that I possibly could get out of it. Now I'll save those as ProRes files that are quite a bit smaller, and that's what I hold on to.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I just would second everything said. If you're going to buy a big fancy camera, shoot RAW. It's just so much better. And like Steven says, you only need that raw data long enough to get the image tweaked and finalized. You don't need to keep it afterwards. I doubt Steven's going to go back in 10 years and re-white balance the Father's Day images from 2019. So,
well, I will say one thing. There was a huge jump around, I think it was like 2012. Lightroom, or all of Adobe, redid their RAW engine. So the way that all the sliders work completely changed, and it made a really, really big difference. And if you go back and edit the same photos from 10 years ago now with the new RAW engine from Adobe, it'll make your photos will look much, much better.
Okay, well, I stand corrected.
I hate to complicate it a little bit, but I'm just saying that has happened in the past. It depends how much you care.
And it probably will happen again. What about alternatives to Adobe Photoshop? I know both of you use it. Affinity. There's several developers out there now making competing software. A lot of listeners aren't that eager to sign up for a Photoshop subscription. Have you guys got any experience with any of the competitors and any thoughts or recommendations?
I mean, I stick to Photoshop because it's what I grew up on, and it does everything I need. It's incredibly powerful, but it is relatively expensive, and there's really great stuff out there. I never use the other stuff heavily enough to form really strong opinions about which one's actually better to stick to in the long run. But, I know the Pixelmator and Affinity are both fantastic. So, Steven, do you have a strong opinion about them?
I'm right where you are. I grew up in school learning Photoshop, and I already pay for the Adobe Suite for several other applications. So I haven't really needed to branch out. But to David's point, there are some really good options between Pixelmator Pro and Affinity Photo, both on the Mac. There's lots of options on iOS as well. It's easier than ever to find an application that kind of works the way you think without having to jump into bed with Adobe.
Yeah, I deal with Pixelmator Pro. It was a one-time purchase, and they did sponsor us years ago, but I purchased it, and just for that reason. I'm not good enough at this, and I don't do it often enough to justify subscription. I like the idea of buying one app, and it handles my raw photos just fine.
Yeah, I like it. I know it's good. I should at some point just spend the time learning a few of these apps just so I can form a real opinion for when people ask, because I don't want to make everybody think that they need to subscribe to the whole Adobe package, which I think less and less is critical these days. I mean, same with the video side. Right now, I'm actually doing a series of interviews with like YouTubers and professional commercial editors and talking about why they choose the editing platform that they do. So Premiere, Final Cut, some are using DaVinci more and more these days, but it used to be more obvious where you would go and why you would choose the most expensive one, but now it's the whole everything's being upset because there's all these really great apps coming out at lower price points.
Well, I mean, you have so much free time. I think you should just get on that comparison right now.
Yeah, working on it.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by OmniFocus for the web. Hey, OmniFocus users, did you know that you can now use OmniFocus on any computer with a web browser? That's right, the Omni Group has released a new product called OmniFocus for the web, and it works hand in hand with your installation of OmniFocus. So if you're managing your tasks on your iPhone, but then you get sitting at a Windows PC, no problem. You can just log into OmniFocus for the web and see all your tasks. And this isn't just a simple viewing of your tasks. You can also go in and edit tasks. You can mark them off. There's quite a bit of power you can do with OmniFocus for the web. It is a product that is meant to be used in conjunction with the main OmniFocus app on your Mac or your iOS device. But once you've got that app running, you can now access and use and check off and use your data on anything with a web browser. It's just great. So when you're in front of a computer that can't run OmniFocus, you can stay on track with OmniFocus on the web. Now, since this has a back-end web service, there's a subscription involved. You can either just get an add-on subscription if you already own OmniFocus, or they have a full subscription where you can get all the applications on all the platforms, plus the web service. Head over to omnigroup.com to learn more about that. You can download a free 2-week trial to try OmniFocus on the web. I hear from listeners all the time that use OmniFocus but just want access to their data sometimes when they're away from their Apple devices. Well, gang, this is the solution. Thank you so much, Omni Group, for supporting the Mac Power users. Head over to omnigroup.com today and check out OmniFocus for the web. You mentioned that you've got a podcast. Tell us a little bit about that and how you put that together.
Podcasting is kind of my favorite thing to do. Even in terms of gear, I was talking about how much I love all gear lately. Audio gear is, I think, the coolest. Like, it looks the best. It's, I have the least real need for it, but that's why I started a podcast, so I could justify having some cool audio gear, because I just think it's great. But yeah, the podcast, it's called Stalman Podcast, and it's the goal is to kind of merge that creativity and technology so that people that work in fields that involve both can feel a bit more comfortable about it or get excited about trying out a new part of the creative stack that maybe they're not as comfortable with. So I talk about everything from photography, video, audio, design, and development. Actually, I just did the first development episode with Casey List the other day, and he was telling me, like, here's how you get started as a developer. And I just want people to get excited about turning maybe a hobby of some kind of creative field into potentially a job, or just getting much, much better at the hobby and trying to speak from more of a professional level. Like, actually, I'd say a big inspiration was just over the years listening to Alex Lindsay talk about production in the Mac world, because most of the other people on podcasts that I listen to aren't doing the really heavy lift, like the super challenging level production stuff. And whenever Alex Lindsay talks about it, he's using stuff to the extreme and like has a million cameras running, and like, yeah, that's what I want to learn about. So I'm trying to cater to a bit of that audience that I always wanted to be a part of, where it's like, here's how to tackle some of the hardest problems in production.
Now, I don't actually have a camera in Steven's office, but I just imagine once we started talking about audio hardware that he's sitting up on the edge of a seat right now. Am I right?
I mean, I have some disagreements about your mic choice, but
know. Well,
you do you, man.
Well,
you
when Steven came on the podcast the first time, after I was editing it and I was listening to both of our voices, I was like, Steven's mic sounds a lot better than mine. And I ended up mixing my levels on that episode to sound more like yours, because I was like, it sounds much crisper and cleaner.
All right, tell the listeners, what kind of mic do you have?
So right now I'm talking to a Heil PR40, which I think this comes from Twit, basically, of that, it was the Leo Lapart mic for so long. Like, well, then that's the mic. That's the one I need. And there are things I like. There are qualities to it that I do enjoy. Especially for more of like a voiceover environment where it's like shorter duration, more like an announcer. It's a little boomy and a little bassy. And what I find it's missing that I really like about Steven's mic, what's the name? I forget the name of your mic.
At the time, I was using the Shure 87A.
Oh, but you're over it.
But in the last couple of weeks, I've switched to what David is using, which is, the name is now forgetting me.
Neumann 105.
Oh,
yes.
Okay. Well, there you go. Okay. So
Steven just outed himself.
Switch.
I love that.
Yeah.
I haven't told anybody. I want to see if anyone
noticed,
caught on listening, but no one did.
No one ever notices. I mean, all these changes that we make. I mean, even I started, I build a little sound booth around myself every time I record. Our studio is like a wide open concrete box. It's the worst
Perfect
possible.
for audio.
Oh God, it's terrible. So right now, I mean, I do this every time I record. I hung a sound blanket up in front of me and put baffles on either side of me, and that's the only way I can make this space usable at all. But nobody noticed. Even the guy that was editing my podcast, I'm like, "Do you notice anything different this week?" He's like, "No, not really." Okay, fine.
Well, a good podcast mic, in fairness, isn't going to pick up a lot of audio very far away from the microphone, so that helps.
That's the goal. So I have the Heil PR40 running into a DBX 286S, and that's mostly to cut down some of the background noise for my, especially, it doesn't matter so much for the final recording, because I'll do that in post, but sometimes if there's a sound that the guest might find distracting, it just cuts out a bit of that silent time. And I don't use much else on it. Honestly, I don't use the compressor or anything. And then I have a mute switch in between, and then that runs into a Sound Devices Mix Pre 3.
Which is a great little interface. We've spoken about this in podcast topics in the past, but using an XLR microphone, you need a way to get that over to USB for the Mac. And one thing I really like about the Mix Pre line, Relay owns one of the bigger ones, is that you can record into a Mac and onto an SD card at the same time. And it's basically the only line of products in the field that do that. Most of them just do one or the other, but not both at the same time. And so we bought one for the Relay live shows, and I've been extremely happy with it.
Yeah, the quality of sound devices it's really incredible. The only downside I've found is that it does want to be a field recorder first. So some of the USB interface stuff is a little finicky or just doesn't work the way you'd expect, really. And
it has its opinions about how things should work.
Yeah, it's kind of strange, but once you figure it out.
And just to stay inside baseball for one little bit longer, the Heil PR40, I've worked with one of those mics before, and they need a really strong preamp in order to work because they're low. The level is low, and the sound devices is what you need to make that mic work for you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so I got that's why I first bought the DBX286S, because it's got a good preamp in it. It makes the mic a lot louder. So it was to drive this Heil is a lot of the reason I bought it. Now I can run it cleanly into the Mix Pre 3, and it has so much signal, it can get it loud enough. But otherwise, and same with, everybody loves the Shure SM7B. But it's even more gain hungry. It really needs a lot. And same thing, the Mix Pre 3 can handle that without putting a signal boost in the chain, which a lot of people otherwise need to do.
Well, one of the nice things about audio is the costs are relatively small. I mean, the microphones we're talking about, I think, are kind of top of the line. And like, I will never need to upgrade this one, knock on wood. And it didn't crush me with debt to buy it, unlike a Mac Pro.
No, it's true. Or compared to camera gear, your A7 III was a lot more expensive than
multiples.
For the price of an A7 III, you can get the most rare best mic in the world. So,
And then you also, in addition to your podcast, you have a YouTube channel.
Yeah, YouTube's the thing that it's probably the reason you guys are aware of me now is that there's been quite a lot of growth on my YouTube lately, and that's been a lot of people's into finding my podcast as well, or finding my Instagram. YouTube is great because of the way search works on it. So when I create a video talking about the new iPhone or the MacBook Pro or the Mac Pro or any of them, people are constantly searching for that, and I think it's the second biggest search engine in the world. I know I've heard that, and I'm not sure if it's true, but it seems like it could be. So people are constantly looking for information about all these things. And on a lot of other platforms like social media, like Twitter or Instagram, when you post something, it will die pretty quick. It has a very short half-life. But once you jump over to YouTube, I've had videos that get more views now, years after their release, than they did when they came out. And that's pretty cool to have that happen. So things have a much longer lifetime there, potentially. Some things die quickly too. But there's that ability for people to really discover you from a lot more angles. And that's just in terms of discoverability. There's other great things about YouTube. I've really enjoyed the community. I've been able to connect to people in a much more tangible way than with anything I was creating before, where they feel like they know you. And I think that relationship happens on podcasting as well, where you get to know much more of the personality of the person than if you're just looking at photography or a Twitter account. So it creates a closer relationship, and I've made some pretty great friends through YouTube and been able to connect with a lot of people. I really like it as a format.
And you get to use all your gear.
That's the best part. And I can buy new gear to make a review about it. It's a fountain of limitless excuses to buy new things.
I think you do a good job on your channel of having a variety of topics. You can talk very fluidly, going from one video about camera equipment to setup, and then you have a recent one about music creation. You had that MacBook Pro video. I feel like I look at that and I'm almost a little bit jealous that you can kind of move between your interests so fluidly, and it still feels like one YouTube channel. It doesn't feel like you have 2 or 3 shows sort of crammed into one place.
Yeah, all the YouTube advice is to really niche down and pick a topic and follow that. And I get why. That's easy advice to give, and I'd probably give that to a lot of people. I just wanted to be able to make it really diverse. So same thing with the podcast. That's why it makes it hard to describe, but it makes it something I can get more excited about because there's just a lot of different things that I'm interested in. And yeah, I mean, I'd really like to do more YouTube. I mean, YouTube has the potential to become our full-time job. Like the way that it could potentially, like if I can continue to grow it the way that it has at its biggest times, that could be the main focus of everything that we do pretty soon. So it's been really fun to watch that happen. And again, the biggest challenge though is for us to be able to have the time to do it right. You know, I'd love to be able to at least get a video out a week, which I don't right now. Usually it's about 2 a month. It means finding an editor, or assistants, or I don't know what I'm going to do. I need help somehow, but
you need a time turner. That's what you need.
I need a lot of things, but yeah, that'd be perfect.
But and then we talked earlier, but you do have a presence on Instagram, and you do a really good job with your Instagram posts. I mean, looking at all of the knowledge and experience you have as a photographer, as a content creator, I really am impressed with your work on Instagram.
Thank you very much. Instagram's one that I really stuck on. Like, it's hard for me to know what I want to do with it because there's sort of this pressure that if I'm identifying myself as a photographer, that every photo needs to be a great photo or like portfolio worthy. And so then there can become this wall of like, nothing's good enough. Nothing's good enough to post. I'm not going to represent myself well enough. And so I end up posting nothing that day. So I've actually been trying to treat it more casually and worrying a little bit less about just about it being an amazing photo and more just like telling a story about my life. Because in a lot of ways, that's the point of photography, is just storytelling. So worrying more about if it's interesting than if it's necessarily an incredible shot. And then, like I was saying earlier too, Instagram is really being taken over by stories in a lot of ways, just in terms of total engagement and how people are using it. A lot of people I talk to lately are like, yeah, I mostly just look at stories now. I barely look at the feed. So the way I've been using stories is often I kind of shoot them like a little micro vlog where I just edit together a quick sequence of videos. And I mean, just like a YouTube vlog. They just play one after the other. And I just find that a bit more interesting than having the really low quality, casual, normal stories, the way that's supposed to be used. So I do it kind of more like real videos.
And how do you put that? Do you put that together on a Mac or do you do that on your phone?
When I'm excited about a new camera or I'm excited about trying something, I'll do it on a Mac and I'll edit in Final Cut. But most of the time, what I'm using is an app called Spark Camera. And it works similar to recording videos in how Snapchat used to do it, where you launch the app and all you're seeing is a full screen camera and you press and hold and it'll start recording. When you let go, it stops recording. And then it starts stacking up the clips in a sequence. So you're basically editing as you're recording. So whatever you shoot starts to become the edit, and then you can trim them a little bit later, add music in the background. But really quickly, you can shoot for the edit and create a narrative and create some storytelling that, I find really engaging. I love that way of doing it because I don't have to think too hard. I don't have to feel like I'm building some editing debt. You know, when I'm shooting on a real camera, on a bigger camera, and then I know, okay, I'm going to have to download all this when I get home and like plug in the hard drive and
color correct. And you can't stop yourself, right?
Yeah. All these steps. Yeah. So when I'm doing it in Spark Camera or just on a phone in general, sometimes I also use Video Leap to edit. Whatever I'm using, it's much quicker, and that sometimes just gets something posted instead of nothing posted.
I feel like I have to out myself, Stephen. Well, you guys know how I live in Orange County, and I'm a fan of Star Wars and Disneyland simultaneously. Apparently, there is a rebel spy in the brand new Star Wars land or Galaxy's Edge, and he's been sending me pictures and a description of what happens to him every day. You know, his struggles. Over on Instagram at a Batu BATUU_rebel. I don't know. He's a rough guy, but he's having me help him post this stuff. But I'm so clueless on Instagram. He's got like 1,000 followers, and I haven't really done anything. And like Tyler's talking about stories, and I'm like, I've never done a story. Poor Batu rebel. He's running around Batu, getting shot at. I haven't even done a story for him.
I'm looking at it now. It's great.
I think I need to take a course from Tyler. You've got this covered on your YouTube channel too.
Yeah, I did a whole video about it that hopefully could help. The video I did is a slightly more advanced stage. I think you can treat stories more simply. Stephen, you're doing stories, right? Do you have any advice for easy stories, like low pressure?
I think a really fun thing to do on Instagram, I did this a couple of weeks ago, and this I saved into a highlight so you can go see it on my profile, is that I was doing some modifications to my pickup truck because I live in the South and that's what we do, I guess. And I thought a story was a fun way to like bring my followers along with, hey, I'm going to try this thing. You can see over the course of a couple of hours how it's going. And at the end is the payoff that, oh, hey, the lights that I installed, they worked. And, it's just like a little sort of narrative of like what I did on a Saturday with a friend and turn it into like it's weird, like interesting piece of content. And then it can go away or you can choose to save it. So I think finding like a little story to tell, a little thread to pull can make for some really interesting things. Like another one I did that I've gotten a lot of talks about. I stayed at this Airbnb for WWDC last year, and everything in this place was labeled. And like when I say everything, I mean every light switch, the dish soap. So there's one in here of the thermostat. It's like the slider of heat off and cool. That's printed on the thermostat, and then this Airbnb owner put a big label that said the same thing. Like everything was labeled.
Wow, that's very helpful.
And I was like, I think people need to see this. And just again, pulling this thread of like, this is a weird thing that's happening in my life. I like those. I like Instagram stories as a way to share those things.
Yeah, I think stories is exactly what they should be called. Like it's such a correct name for them. This is also just a difference between photos and videos. If you're trying to create a great photograph, it all needs to exist in one moment and all be visible at the same time and capture the whole story in a single frame. Whereas in video or Instagram stories, each moment matters less. So it's more about developing a story. So sometimes I find it easier to shoot video for that reason, that it's like, look, if I didn't get it all in that last frame, but I can fill it in with this next thing that I show. And you're gradually developing more and more context and interest by like over a period of time instead of worrying about it all at once. And Instagram stories, in a way, they're like the simplest form of filmmaking because they could just be stills as well.
Well, Stephen, what is your Instagram handle?
It is Stephen M. Hackett. There'll be a link in the show notes.
Yeah, and mine's Max Sparky. Tyler, what is yours?
Mine is Stalman, which, same name pretty much everywhere. STO, and that's also single L. There is a much more famous Stalman out there.
Yes.
Richard Stalman, who has two L's.
And then Batu Rebel. That guy, Batu Rebel, he just writes a lot. I don't know wherever he comes from. Apparently, he writes a lot. But I'm doing a poor job of his Instagram management for him. I got to figure it out. But it is fun, I think, for folks listening. I think this is a platform that a lot of people are on. It's in some ways, I think it's a lot more positive than things you get on Twitter these days. So it may be worth checking out. And definitely watch Tyler's videos so you can make really great videos.
Yeah, I think this Instagram thing's got legs.
I don't think it's going anywhere.
I want to get better at it so my kids like start asking me how I did something on Instagram, because they don't care about anything I do as Max Sparky. But if I could make some killer Instagram content, I think I would actually get a tiny amount of respect.
I know when we were together in Chicago for our live show earlier this year, they were in charge of your sort of Instagram stuff. Like we were on stage.
Yeah, they were my social media team.
Yeah, they were. How is he on Instagram? Oh, he's not. It's his much cooler daughters.
Yeah.
This episode of MPU is brought to you by Away. Away creates thoughtful products designed to change how you see the world. They started with the perfect suitcase and now offer a range of essentials that solve real travel problems. Their luggage is loaded with features. The Away carry-on comes in an array of colors, 2 sizes, and 2 materials. And it's lightweight, durable, and made to last for a lifetime of travel. It has built-in compression pads to help you pack more in, and those 4 360-degree spinner wheels guarantee a smooth ride. And their bigger carry-on is sized up to make the most of the overhead bin. Away suitcases are designed to last a lifetime. You get a 100-day trial on everything, plus free shipping within the US, Europe, and Australia. In my family, we have several away suitcases, and the carry-on was great on a recent trip out to California. My wife used it and really enjoyed how much stuff she could pack in such a small case. We've taken our away suitcases all over the country and even out of the country, and every single time they've served us well. So go check it out now, and for $20 off a suitcase, visit awaytravel.com/MPU and use the promo code MPU during checkout. That's awaytravel.com/MPU, and the promo code MPU during checkout will get you $20 off. Thank you so much to Away for their support of this show and Relay FM.
Tyler, in addition to making all this amazing content, you are on the road a lot.
Some would say too much. It is all tied into what we're doing. A lot of our jobs just are involve travel. It's kind of how we end up doing the things that we do. A lot of the times, having an interesting location or background is sort of key to the job. It needs to look exciting and look nice. So we'll end up going to a new place to do that. A lot of the time we're kind of going to similar places. Like we'll spend a lot of time just bouncing between LA, New York, and Toronto, where there's either clients or just other creators or people we're going to collaborate with. But then we also like to try to every once in a while, at least once or twice a year, go somewhere exciting and strange and new and that we've never seen before and create some content while we're there.
Well, as a fellow geek who travels a lot, help us out. What are some of the tricks you've learned through this process?
Well, I'm going to try to make it sound like I don't constantly struggle with it, but
we get that. We all do that, and we get it.
We've found a way to make it work. I mean, the things still get done, even if it's a little painful on the way. So, I mean, I already talked about the MacBook Pro that I use for everything. Because of that, it means that I can't really travel with an iPad. We have a bit too much gear to try to make that lifestyle work, even though I love the new iPad Pros. They haven't found any professional place in my life. But yeah, I mean, what else in terms of technology? Like an important thing to keep in mind is your ability to charge things, which that's a pretty obvious piece of advice, but I have a specific one. Whenever you're traveling somewhere that has different outlets than your home country, always bring a power bar, and then always make sure that everything that you're going to plug into it, as many as possible, have a separate like a 2-prong adapter that can, how do I describe this? It's like attached to a cable so that it doesn't take up 2 spaces. Mm-hmm. So for example, I have like an Anchor USB multi-output charger. There's 2 versions of it. There's one where the charger plugs right into the wall, and that's pretty big. It can take up a bunch of extra space, and it'll often block an extra plug. Or you can get one that has a cable running out of it. The same goes for a lot of camera chargers. So for Canon, for example, my 5D has a version that plugs right into the wall, and I have that. But when I'm traveling, I try to bring the one that has a cord running out of it so I can plug that into the power bar. So just be aware of how many things you're going to be plugging into the wall and find ways to make sure that they're going to fit, because you're constantly out of juice. Everything is always dead at the end of every day.
And you're probably carrying USB batteries like you got a holster full of them.
It's like a deck of cards full of yeah, exactly. We burn through a lot of those, especially if you're shooting photos or videos on the phone.
So somebody needs to make like one of those Chewbacca belts, except just loaded with batteries.
I think that'd be great. I could use one of those.
TSA would love that going through an airport.
I don't know what I get. Which direction should I go? There's the tech side and just the travel side.
Let's talk about the travel side. Why not? Because you do a lot of it.
So, okay, here's a big one. This one, honestly, my wife does the hard work here, but it's really important. So I'll give her the work of talking about it. So scouting out where you're going is really, really important if you want good photos. And not just like professional photos, but just if you want to like be excited about the photos that you take. It's so helpful to browse Instagram and also Pinterest. Those are the places we go to just find some of those exciting locations that you may not have heard about. There's been tons of examples. The best example was on the trip that we just took. We went to the Dead Sea. And when you get there, the Dead Sea is very flat. There's nothing around. And it's incredibly beautiful, but there's not much to see. Like the scenery it's one thing. But just on our way there, she pulled out her phone and found this tiny little island made entirely of salt. Like the salt just piled up out in the middle of the water, and it has a single dead tree in the middle of it. And it's incredibly beautiful. So she did all this internet sleuthing of like exactly where is it in the lake, and we found it, and we went out there, and swam out to it, and it turned out to be just one of our favorite photos ever. It's really an incredible place. But we didn't know about it on the way there. You never would have just stumbled on it because you have to swim to get to it. And we always find something like that. There's something really unique and special in the area that you're going to. And somebody's already probably taken a photo of it. Honestly, it's challenging to find something completely new. So looking around online can be just really helpful ways. Just, by either searching for hashtags of the area or geotags. Pinterest Pinterest doesn't seem to be as popular anymore, or I don't know, people don't talk about it as much, but it's really a great resource for collecting ideas and getting inspired about what you want to shoot when you go somewhere.
And how do you deal with the time changes? I mean, it sounds like you're moving around quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the main way is to not to sleep poorly. This is one of those, I just do it wrong. We don't sleep very much. We're always really tired when you travel. But the thing I think other people could learn from, and that is really helpful, is if you're changing time zones a lot, just don't adapt to the new time zone and wake up at sunrise. So, recently that meant 5 o'clock in the last place. We'd have to kind of be where we want to shoot by 5. So we're getting up at least at 4 at the minimum. And, but the thing is, we're in somewhere completely different. We have all this jet lag on our way there. So we're exhausted no matter what. So we just go to bed early, get up really early. And then when you arrive, no one is there. The best illustration of this was when we were in Dubrovnik, Croatia. It's just one of the most incredible cities in the world. I mean, it's where Game of Thrones and Star Wars are filmed. It's so beautiful, but it's a walled city, so there's a limited amount of space inside of it. And by lunchtime, cruise ships arrive and literally completely fill the city. I think at some point they're going to have to limit how many people are coming in because you just can't move. But we would go there at 4 or 5 in the morning, and there is absolutely nobody. The streets are completely empty, and you have the best light. The sun is just coming up. It's very soft, warm, and from a low place in the sky. It's the best possible lighting, and you're by yourself. It's a completely different experience. So anywhere we go, we try to make sure that as often as possible, we're waking up uncomfortably early, which I hate. I don't like waking up early, but it is so worth it when you travel. So anytime you can, I think it's worth it. And then just try to go to bed early. We just don't party when we travel.
Okay. That's good advice. Just don't party. That's all.
Well, I mean, yeah, photos or party. You gotta, one or the other.
Well, you say you don't like waking up early, but I find when I'm dealing with jet lag, it's not even a question of waking up early. It's just, I'm just a mess anyway. So it really doesn't matter. What about apps and, data management? Any tricks when you're on the road?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's a challenge. We found a way that works for us. So I do have a NAS Synology back at home in our studio, and it has a lot of our archival photos. So that is plugged into the iMac, and I love screens to be able to access that stuff. So a lot of the time, if we don't have all of our photos with us, we can access everything at home through logging in remotely.
Do you have any data issues with that? Because you're going international, and so Screens is a great app that allows you to remote back to your presumably your iMac at home. Is that ever a problem? Is a data pipeline ever a concern for you when you do that?
This is another one where we just sort of suffer through. We just pay a lot for our phone bills. So our local phone carrier has something called Roam Like Home, meaning we can just pay a couple extra dollars a day, and then we have the same amount of data that we have when we're in Canada. So we can use a lot of it. And then Wi-Fi is always a struggle. It's usually too slow. So I don't know. We kind of struggle through it, but it hasn't stopped us from doing anything really critical. Somehow we've been able to make it work so far.
So you're the phone company equivalent of a whale.
Yeah. That's very literally true. We just made some changes to our plan this month that just by reorganizing it, we're saving, I think, $150 a month.
Use cloud storage too?
I mean, I use it for the phone. The phone is backing up to, this is an important part of it. It backs up to iCloud. I pay for the family plan on iCloud, so both of our phones are constantly backing up whenever they hit Wi-Fi. And also to the free version of Google Photos. That's where everything ever goes. Google Photos is just constantly receiving dumps of smaller JPEGs of everything. So in an emergency, if we lost the highest quality of everything, hopefully we'd have some version of it left. But the main way that we're backing up has to be on hard drives because it would never finish. We're shooting too fast to have online backups ever catch up. So a normal memory card for us is 64 gigs, and we'll usually fill 1 or 2 of those per shoot. And then if we shoot a few times a week, that never gets backed up. It just never finishes. So I tried a few times, but I couldn't really make it make sense for us. So instead, we're carrying around all of these USB drives, keeping them in sync using ChronoSync. Right now I'm using ChronoSync Express, but since I started using SetApp more, they were a sponsor on some videos, and then I just really got hooked. I mean, there's some great apps in SetApp. And I've been using ChronoSync since way before that, but the Express version does everything that I need. I'm just keeping the drives mirrored and erasing differences once we're done culling stuff. So.
Yeah, ChronoSync, I mean, I think that goes back to like episode 1 of Mac Power Users. It's been around forever.
Maybe that's where I heard about it.
Yeah, it may be. It's just a great application to solve the old problem of syncing data before you had reliable cloud services. But it still works, especially for someone like you who's doing a lot of large file media. I mean, I don't think there's anything better.
Yeah, it's really critical. I forget about it sometimes because it's such a small, simple, boring part of the pipeline, but it's really, really helpful and important in making sure that, especially like having some verification, making sure that nothing's corrupted when you back it up, stuff like that.
Can I pick your brain for a minute on, I guess, camera cards, the SD and the SD mini cards? I have several devices that use them, and I'm sure there's listeners that have the same problem. Every time you go to buy one on Amazon, now there are like multiple classifications of memory cards. Which ones are we supposed to buy, Tyler?
Okay, it's kind of tough. It depends what you're creating. The highest requirements come with larger, raw photos. That's kind of when it's worth spending money.
I would have thought it was 4K video, so I'm already going down the wrong trail.
Yeah, and 4K video has a hard minimum, and if you don't shoot on a fast enough card, it basically stops working. But that minimum isn't the highest level. Whereas at the highest level, you stop seeing any advantage in 4K because once it's fast enough, it's fast enough. Like it's kind of like an HDMI cable. Like if it can carry the signal, like you're good. It's not going to record the video any faster. The advantages come in that for stills, for photos. Yeah, sorry. When I say stills, I'm referring to photos. They are sometimes the card is slower than the buffer on the camera. So if you're shooting quickly, all of a sudden it'll say like, okay, buffering, and it's writing the previous photos that you shot to the card, and you're waiting for that. So that's when you need the highest speed cards. Otherwise, the kind of mid-level is usually good enough. I honestly forget how the rankings work exactly. So instead of explaining it poorly in this, I'm going to refer you guys to a video by a YouTuber named Gerald Undone, and he does a great job of breaking it down, and hopefully you can throw that in the show notes. There's a lot of different classifications and names and stuff that I even find them hard to memorize. So I'd have to look at my cards to remember what they are.
Yeah, I need a couple, and literally I just put I put a pin in it, and I said, okay, I'm not even qualified to buy at this point. I have to go research before I can do it. So I'll watch his video. Because it does depend on what devices you're using and what you're shooting. But
yeah, and
I think it used to be a lot easier. And I sound like a cranky old man, but
just don't get the cheapest ones. It's like buy the mid-level ones. Buy the mid-priced ones from a reputable brand. Most of mine are Lexar, but SanDisk is going to do just as well. Sony has some good ones. Like there's a lot of good ones out there. Don't spend the most. Don't spend the least. You'll probably be okay.
All right. Last question. One of my favorite questions for guests on workflow shows. Share a few apps with us that you particularly love that people may not know about. And I just dropped this on you, so I apologize.
Oh, yeah, the people don't know about. I don't know what I wrote down. I mean, like I like Trip Mode. I'm sure listeners of this show know about Trip Mode by now. What else is like fun? Here, I'm going to open my phone real quick. I like to experiment with a lot of apps that don't stick around, or that I just use very occasionally. A good one is it's called Touch Retouch, where you can remove objects from your iPhone photos. That's fun. Facetune too. Facetune is known because you can like remove all the blemishes. It's sort of famous for that, but it actually has a lot of other advanced editing tools that are pretty impressive. Like once you start digging around, there's some really crazy stuff in there.
What do you use it for?
Just like it's a variety pack it's a Swiss Army knife of photo editing tools.
Facetune. I've never heard of that. I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, Facetune has been one of the top earning apps for a long time on the App Store, but it's usually, people think of it as being for beauty bloggers, trying to clean up their skin, like making overly smooth skin. That's the reputation it has, but it actually can do
I definitely need it.
Quite a lot more than
I definitely need it.
Yeah, right up your alley. A lot of people love Snapseed. I find a lot of its editing algorithms aren't as good. Just the way that it treats exposure and contrast and color adjustments, I prefer what VSCO or Darkroom can do. They both, to my eye, are superior in their ability to edit. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have anything really like out of the box, out of the ordinary.
Well, those are some good ones, though. Those are some definitely some.
I have some Lightroom presets that I think have some nice color in them. If anybody wants those,
I feel like the photo editing and retouching apps. There are so many that I am sure there's a lot of apps out there that would be very useful to me that I'm just not aware of, because it's overwhelming when you go in the store. The pure number of different filter-based apps and other edit-based apps. So I've relied on some of the stuff you said in the past, and I've been actually trying to limit the editing workflow to just 2 or 3 apps, and ones that I know, and I know where the good filters are. But I do think it can be a challenge for people trying to pick this stuff up.
Yeah, that is advice that I'll give is don't try to use everything. Like experiment, test everything, but don't think that you need to look at every filter every time you decide. I go back to the same filters over and over again just to speed things up, because it can really bog you down constantly making new decisions. Same with the way I'm working in Lightroom. I have those presets. I just put them on every photo. There's only 4 or 5 of them, and I'm just choosing, do I want the more saturated one or the less saturated one? Like there's just sort of subtle differences between them. And I'm making less choices each time that I need to edit something, because it can really, you can spend all day like, I have 100 different versions of this photo to look at before I decide what I'm going to use. And that's not the most productive way to spend your time.
Well, Tyler, you do spend your time productively, because you have a successful podcast, a hugely successful YouTube channel, an Instagram account that I envy. And we're going to put links to all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all this with us. We are not going to wait 10 years to have you on again.
Oh, thanks so much, David. Honestly, it's really great to be here. You guys are an amazing part of the Mac and Apple community.
All right, that does it for Mac Power Users episode 489. Thanks again, Tyler. Like we said, we'll have links for everything. Thanks to our sponsors, SaneBox, Omni Group, and Away. And we'll see you all next week.